Ooh. It's just like riding a bike. I was afraid I would miss, but I didn't. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the September 5th meeting of the Rotary Club of Brentwood. I am not Jennifer Bourne. She's watching, so you know that she heard that. My name is Drew Rogers, and I am very proud to have the opportunity to preside over the meeting today on behalf of Jennifer, who is currently out with a broken ankle. And so I'm sorry that her pain leads to my opportunity at Power again. But we do want to remember her as we open the meeting with the invocation by Tom Carr, followed by the pledge and four-way test by Donna Weeks. So I'll ask Tom to the podium.
Yes, let's please keep in mind all our Rotarians and former Rotarians who are ill or in bad health. So just keep them in your mind. Bow with me, please. Heavenly Father, we gather today as Rotarians, grateful for the gift of fellowship and the opportunity to serve. Bless the work of our hands and our minds as we strive to live by the four-way test, seeking truth, fairness, goodwill, and benefit to all. Grant us wisdom in our decisions, compassion in our service, and joy in our friendship. May our efforts today strengthen our community and bring hope where it is needed most. We ask for your guidance and blessing on each of us here, on our families, and all of those we serve through Rotary. Amen.
And if everybody would join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And the four-way test for things we think, say, and do. Number one, is it the truth? Number two, is it fair to all concerned? Number three, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And number four, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Donna. We will now ask our club secretary, Jennifer Shepard, to introduce our guests and visiting Rotarians. And we have a couple of visiting Rotarians from a great distance.
We do. So I'm going to start at this table because it seems to be focused in this part of the room. Got a lot of visitors today that y'all are familiar with, but I'm going to reintroduce anyway. Karen Clark, who is a member of the Franklin Evening, downtown Franklin, not the wine club. The wine club. Okay. She's a member of the Wine Rotary, the fun one that everybody talks about. Anyway, and she's a banker with First Bank. So, you know, bankers are super cool. And we also have visiting from Nebraska, Jim and Teresa Delahunty. Would you guys like to just introduce yourselves real quick and tell us what events you're?
Hi, my name is Jim Delahunty. I'm president-elect of the Ogallala, Nebraska Club. My wife, Teresa Delahunty. We're here this weekend for her 50th birthday. So we were.
Hey, happy birthday.
And we just came down. We thought we'd check out a club, and we're glad to be here. Thank you.
Welcome. Glad you're here, Jim and Teresa.
And many of you know Mr. Son Robinson. Keith is here with us today. Always good to see you. And then we've got several new members that are in the pipeline that if you have it, it's high time you do. So stay after and introduce yourself. Tammy McInerney and Tom Tunnicliffe, who's over here, and John Thompson, who's over there. And I believe that's all. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer. This begins a really busy week for Rotary, so I'll ask Lennis to uncover the masking of the projector. I've been asked to make a couple of announcements concerning our events that are coming up this week, and then I'm going to invite Bob Thompson to induct one of our new members that's been in the pipeline. But as you see on the upcoming events, we do have a very busy week. We do have a meeting today, but then that will be followed by Monday, the 9th annual Rotary Golf Classic at Nashville Golf and Athletic that Larry will talk about in a moment. But then on Thursday, we have the First Responders Picnic on September 11th, and that is at Granny White Park Rotary Pavilion. That is at 5 p.m. Sybil Buchanan called me this afternoon or late this morning and said, we need people to come help make sure that we can have a first responders picnic on Thursday, September 11th. So if you're available, I believe it starts at about 4:30 or 5. If you can get there early, please do, and help honor our first responders in the Brentwood community. That is on Thursday, September 11th. Alan, there is no meeting next Friday. Do not show up here, please. No meeting next Friday because we have the picnic on Thursday, September 11th. And then if you'll go down the list, October 17th, we have an opportunity to serve with One Gen Away. And then October 20th, there is a countywide meeting for District 6760. So please mark your calendars for those events. So I guess what we will do now is I'll ask Larry Kane to join me at the podium to make an announcement about Monday's golf tournament. Larry.
I'm a much better walker and talker than I am standard talker. I want to put something up here that's special. We got the tournament Monday. I'm not going to say anything about Just Ask or anything about that today. I want to talk about these 35 people right here on this list, members of our club who are going to be working Monday in the golf tournament. They volunteered. Thanks to Susie Lindsay, who's our volunteer chairman and does a wonderful job. But this makes my day when I see that we've got this many members who are willing to go out and work 1 shift, 2 shifts. There may be somebody working 3 shifts. I don't know. But if you're on this list, stand up. All right, let's have a round of applause. Thank you all so very much. We've got 120 golfers. That's 30 foursomes. That's the maximum that I want to have in a tournament. We've got 120 golfers coming to play at noon. We've got food for them at lunch. We've got a little hors d'oeuvre thing afterwards. It's going to be a fun day for the golfers, and that's what we want to have. And thanks to our workers, it's going to be a very efficient day from a tournament standpoint. I won't talk about money. We're not going to make what we made last year. I'll just tell you that, which is disappointing to me. But we'll talk a lot about that on October 24th when I do my wrap-up. And I'll have a wrap-up of what all we did, the numbers, et cetera, et cetera. And you know me and numbers. I'll have some numbers. So, but anyway, let's enjoy Monday as it is, and let's enjoy having people out there working, our guests playing. I'm going to make a little speech beforehand about our club and hopefully maybe some of those 120, excuse me, there's 8 members, 112 guests of ours that will be there. They might want to join, who knows? So we're going to put a little pitch on them while we're out there, and I'd invite all you members who are working, as you talk to people that come to whatever you're doing out there, if they're guests, say something about the club. It's a good opportunity for us. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Larry. And I will say something about the golf tournament on Monday, because there are opportunities to make donations for the foundation. While the sponsorship opportunities are no longer there are opportunities to make donations. And I think if anyone is like me and enjoys the opportunity to give away money through our community grants and our major grants, that is not possible without the money that is raised through the golf tournament. And I can tell you that Larry and others work tirelessly to make sure that this is a successful golf tournament, but also a fundraiser for us to be able to give that money away. So if you are able to raise money through donations, I would encourage you to do so. I'll now ask Bob Thompson to join me at the podium along with Tammy McInerney so that we can induct a new member into the club. Bob.
Thank you, Drew. Well, Tammy McInerney found us. She was looking for ways to expand her community after she moved here, and she found our meeting, and she came by, 2-3 months ago, I guess. So the fact that she's standing here, we must have passed her test type thing. So Tammy's a resident of Brentwood. She lives here with her husband and grown son. Both she and her husband are practicing CPAs. He's not.
Works for Stanford.
He worked for Stanford remotely. Oh, my goodness. Okay. But Tammy is CPA, and she focuses on taxes, and she does her remote work with a client base primarily in Northern California. So both of them are extracting income from Northern California and delivering it to Tennessee. Thank you. Okay, she was born in San Antonio, Texas, into an Air Force family. And I believe both your father and your brother-in-law are buried in Arlington. So quite a family. Tammy spent about 30 years practicing accounting in California, and then she moved to Brentwood in late 2023. And I was asking her about why she had, she could choose anything all over the United States. She's moving, okay. And she said when she was looking for schools with her son, they came to the Nashville area and kind of fell in love with it. And the more they looked at it, the more they liked it. And she has family in Florida. So I'm delighted to have you meet a wonderful new Rotarian who I am sure will be supportive and I'm sure a highly contributing member of the Rotary Club. If you haven't met her yet, please take the opportunity either later this meeting or in the coming meetings. So welcome.
Tammy, I will get your packet before the end of the meeting. I will make sure that you have your new member packet. Sorry for not having that. A little rusty at the podium, but it's all coming together. I was going to do Happy Bucks today, and I really had tried to schedule the time to allow for that. But then as I was coming in, Burt Bradford handed me $100 to keep Tom Carr from talking during Happy Bucks. Well, this is a good deal. So I'm going to ask Ted Elanchelian to lead us in Happy Bucks.
Okay, who is happy? The answer is everybody, because this is the first time I'm doing Happy Bucks. So I'm going to stand by your table whether you are planning or not. So here we go.
So I haven't been happy in a long time, as many of you know. Do you follow college football at all? Okay, well, good. I wanted to read this letter that I saw from Nick Saban, and where'd Bert go? He left it.
He's outside. He's outside.
So here it is. Dear Bama Nation, what you saw last Saturday was revenge from God for my using influence in smoke-filled rooms to steal the playoff spot from FSU in 2023. So my sin hosed over Kalen, but that's not my problem. Thomas Castellanos was right. I can't protect you anymore. Your old friend, Nick Saban.
I'm still waiting for the $90. All right, here we go.
This has nothing to do with football, but tomorrow Keith and I celebrate 44 years of wedded bliss.
Congratulations.
Well, eagerly anticipating the golf tournament on Monday, and I heard what Larry said about the numbers being a done deal. They are not. The golf auction is open. Items are available. If you feel like maybe your effort for finding sponsors wasn't what it's been in the past, there are a couple of things you can do. You can bid for items, or you can share this on social media. Laura Troop had a nice little post that she posted on Facebook. All you need to do is share Laura's post on your own feed, and you'll get anybody from anywhere that is friends with you to take a look at this stuff and potentially bid on it. We've got an opportunity to make our golf tournament a financial success. Please consider doing that, and please point people to the auction site.
Thank you.
Very good.
All right, well, here's $1 for the number one team in the country, the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Somebody's got to have something better than that.
Just a real quick backup. Lennox, thank you so much for saying that about the auction. The auction is going to be big for us guys, and it was brand new to us this year. And I know you got 2 months to think about it, and probably if you look at the numbers up there, it's kind of overwhelming. But the guys and the groups around the country that have used this auction from the same group that represents us, have had great success with it. So just bear with us this year. We'll do what we can do. We've had some bids. We'll make a little bit of money on it this year. But next year, we're going to go after this thing. And I think you're going to be really surprised at what we can do with it. So thanks for bringing that up, Linus.
Hi, who else is happy?
Anybody else? Surely. Somebody will
Thank
donate
you.
Alan $1, won't they? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Ted. And I will now ask Michael Heineman to come to the podium and introduce our distinguished speaker, Kim Hinton.
Thank you, sir. You know, it's a rare occasion when you get the opportunity to introduce a longtime competitor and then feel compelled to actually make up nice things about them. I moved here in 1987 and soon learned about many of the architecture firms that existed in Tennessee, and one firm stood out. Tuck Hinton Architects was founded in 1984 by partners Steve Tuck and Kim Hinton. And when I arrived, I determined that that firm was the premier design firm. They had accomplished so much at that time and continued to do so for a total of 35 years under that name. Notable projects by Tuck Hinton Architects included the Tennessee Bicentennial Mall, Country Music Hall of Fame, Frisch Art Museum, Nashville Public Square, multiple buildings at MTSU, Vanderbilt, and MBA, and the Tennessee State Archives, State Library and Archives. After the sale of firm in 2019, Kim Hinton has continued as a sole practitioner in architecture and continues with many other interests as well. I will say that the firm that has continued under a different name, I'll take some credit. One of their principals was an intern for me about 25 years ago. So I get some credit for their continued success. Kim is a fellow in the American Institute of Architects. He has served on the boards of the Nashville Rotary Club, the Nashville Symphony, the Tennessee Architectural Foundation, the Nashville Historic Foundation, and the Tennessee Historic Commission. He is an architect, urban designer, visual artist, historian, public speaker, and author. Here to speak today about his most recent book, Tennessee Bicentennial Mall, please welcome Kim Hinton.
Well, good afternoon. Okay, let's try this again. Good afternoon. All right. What a great group. I send greetings from the Downtown Rotary Club, Downtown Nashville Rotary Club. And I'm going to speak to you today about a project that consumed me and a wonderful opportunity. I'm going to see if these slides work. Okay, so I'm going to forward. I'm going to talk about the state capitol, then I'm going to talk about the area where the Bicentennial Mall was built. And really the title of this talk is The Secrets About the Bicentennial Mall, because the park has been there for many years, but a lot of things have gone on in the formation of the park, and then a lot of things continue to happen there. Talk a little bit about the design of the park, and then the cultural destination that it really is now because there's a state museum and state library and archives there. I'm going to throw a lot of images at you. It's really interesting because when the whole project was conceived, we were under the shadow of the success of the Tennessee Centennial Celebration, which was supposed to be held in 1896. That was the 100th anniversary of Tennessee, okay? But it was late. It was 1 year late. And that's because of a lot of reasons, finances, squabbles, just everything. And I remember when I first had a meeting with Governor Ned McWhorter, he basically said, you know, and he always called me, he never called me by my right name. He always called me Kenny. McWhorter was this big guy. And he's like, Kenny, we're not going to be late. Say, yes, sir, Governor. Okay. So hitting the bicentennial date was 1996. Okay. The centennial celebration was absolutely spectacular. It was a colossal success. These buildings were built, most of them were built wood and plaster, and they were torn down immediately afterwards. But it was an incredible thing, and it included electric lights. No one had ever seen electric lights in Nashville. And so it was a spectacular success, but nobody wanted to do a similar thing for our bicentennial, build a lot of exhibition buildings. But we start with state capitol. This is probably the most important single building in the state of Tennessee. Signed in 1845, and it was finished in 1855. Why does it look the way it looks? Well, it looks that way because it's a neoclassical building, and there's several architects in the room, great friends of mine, Keith Robinson, in addition with Michael and others, and we had to study architecture and the history of it, but I want the laymen to know that neoclassical architecture and Greek revival architecture became very important in our new nation's history. I had a chance a year ago to visit the real Parthenon. I urge you, if you get a chance, please go. It is more beautiful than I ever expected. And early in our country's history, Greek revival was important because we had founded our nation on democracy. We kind of inherited democracy. And one way to show that in our public buildings is to copy Greek buildings, and that's why so many important buildings in America look like Greek revival temples. Of course, those temples are pagan temples, but it doesn't matter. It's the image, the columns, this kind of statuesque. Well, William Strickland was one of the hotshots of this style. He was in Philadelphia, did this building, the Merchants Exchange. And look at the top. It's got a tower on it, okay? Where does that come from? What Strickland did is he did something no other architect had done up until that time. He took a Greek temple, which is kind of the thing at the bottom, radius curves with the columns, and he put another Greek object on top of the building. No one had ever done that. What is that thing? Well, that thing comes from this. It's a Choragic monument, Lysicrates, which is a monument that was built 335 BC. Choragic monument, Lysicrates, okay? Choragic, courage, right? No. Choragic means chorus. Okay. This was a choral monument. It was a monument to a choral leader. Now, this is kind of interesting, but think about Greece of 300 BC. What do? You go out and you fight, you have athletics, you do stuff, and you sing, and you have plays. And the Greeks had huge choruses. I mean, this was a really big deal. They would have these huge festivals and kind of sing at each other. Who could sing the best? And one of the great choral leaders was Lysicrates. So this monument is built to him. And I took a picture of that last year. It's wonderful. Well, that's what ended up on top of the Merchants Exchange. And it ended up on top of Strickland's design for our state capitol. There it is, okay? And it's absolutely beautiful. Of course, it's much larger, and the one in Greece is just a solid object. And this is it's actually a room you can, if you ever get a chance to go there, sneak into it because it's a fabulous space. So our state capitol was finished right before the Civil War. When it was finished, it was the largest and tallest building perhaps in the South. There was nothing like it. Strickland ended up dying right as it was finished, and he's buried in the northeast corner. Well, the guy that was really responsible for working with Strickland and reporting to the legislature, a guy named Samuel Morgan, he lasted until 1880. And he's the one that really made sure the project got finished and done. And he's also buried in the state capitol. So you have two dead bodies in the state capitol. Probably should be others. I won't name names. Interesting, though, during the Civil War, the Confederacy showed the state capitol on the $20 note, okay? That note, and it was done in 1863 and 1864. It's a picture of our state capitol, but it doesn't say that on the note. It just says the Confederacy, and you see this building. There are 3 buildings on Confederate notes. Why did they have buildings? Well, basically, they were telling, their citizens and the Northern folks, we are an established area in America. We are holding our own, and we built some significant buildings to prove it. The interesting thing is, those notes were dated 1863. Well, but Nashville was captured in 1862. So you're showing a building that you don't even control on your currency. After the war, a lot of work was finished to kind of finish the grounds. And here's a picture from Germantown, and you can see the Capitol off in the distance. It really, there's nothing like it on the horizon. It's on the tallest hill in Nashville. Okay, so, and here's even a picture from Vanderbilt University, and the Capitol's way off in the distance. There are no trees, because you got to remember during that time of the Civil War, there were no trees. Everything had been cut down. Anyway, for most of Nashville's history, the Capitol was kind of this thing you saw off in the distance. That's changed a lot. There were problems around the state Capitol, particularly as we came into the first part of the 20th century. There was an area there. It was known as Hell's Half Acre. It was a location of prostitution, gambling, and right beside the state capitol, where you had legislators coming in from all over the state. Oh, I didn't say that they went to the area of prostitution and gambling. I didn't say that. But it was a really rough area. I mean, this is a picture 1950s, and our state capitol has outhouses, and this drove Nashville citizens, particularly leaders, absolutely crazy. This is a color picture. It was a rough area. So what came about is something called urban renewal. Urban renewal was the equivalent of the atomic weapon in planning, in that it came and it did a lot very quickly, but it did some good things and some really bad things. Basically, all those areas were demolished and new public housing was established. And this was really a noble thing to do, have really nice homes for people to live in, indoor plumbing, heating, cooling, all that good stuff in the 1950s. But they also displaced a lot of people, a lot of very important minority businesses. And that area then was reshaped, and it was part of really the first large urban renewal project in the United States. This is after World War II. By the way, the Capitol, which had been built with Tennessee limestone, the limestone started falling apart. Tennessee limestone is very soft. And so in the 1950s, they had almost every piece of limestone on the state capitol replaced with Indiana limestone. So and we ended up with something called James Robertson Parkway, which is this beautiful new boulevard that would allow wonderful development to take place. One of the problems is that, though, they decided to have parking, state employee parking on the north slope. The north slope wasn't considered important. And actually, if you aerial photo, the Capitol's at the bottom, and you're looking out directly north. This green rectangle is where the Bicentennial Mall is going to be at some point. And but if you're out there looking back at the Capitol, it was the old Farmers Market grocery store. There was also the Farmers Market sheds, which are nearby, and a liquor store. This was a very dangerous part of Nashville. I mean, it really was. And it's flat, and there were no real big buildings there. And why is that? Well, why is that is shown in this picture, which is looking directly north from the state capitol. That is a Union tent, pup tent. Union was controlling the state capitol. And you look off in the distance, there's nothing off in the distance. I mean, it's just kind of flat. Why is that? And I'll circulate this area. And what I'll show you is one of the main reasons. You ever wonder why Nashville is where it is on the Cumberland River? Well, I'll show you why. When James Robertson decided to come to this area, they had, other people had been there and they discussed things. There was a river, river water. And you had springs, a lot of springs in this area. And there was a high bluff where the courthouse is, and it drops down quickly to the river. So you can get in the river quickly. But most importantly was this, which is a salt spring. It's called the Big Salt Lick. And actually, John Donaldson, James Robertson had traveled overland to come to this. Later, John Donaldson brought a flotilla of settlers, and they arrived. And the big deal on April the 24th, 1780, was they arrived at the Big Salt Lick. Salt is crucial for early settlements. So you have a major stream, you have salt, and salt was one of the reasons that this area had wildlife, tremendous amount of wildlife. And it had been kind of an Indian sacred hunting ground But at this time that John Donaldson and James Robertson had come here, the Indians were really, they were around, but they weren't settled in this area. And you had the high bluff of the river. So if you ever wonder why Nashville is where it is, it's really because of the Salt Lick. And actually the stream that leads to the Salt Lick starts in Centennial Park. And recently they did a really beautiful development there to re-show this that had always been there, and it's still flowing today. And it flows from Centennial Park all the way to near the Cumberland River, which you see in this thing. And there is the spring itself. Problem is that creek, this is not the Cumberland River. This is that creek, the French Lick Creek, or Lick Branch, a branch of the river. It flooded. And this is a picture from the Capitol looking directly north. The river's off to the right. You see in the foreground, you see a trestle. Well, that was a railroad trestle. Well, when they brought railroad system to Nashville, they knew that if they're going to have the rail lines there, they've got to get them up in the air or they'll be flooded. And it worked. I mean, here's a picture. I don't know who owned the little house in the middle, but but it worked. It was very successful. And here's another picture of the trestle. The trestle started falling apart, and instead of replacing it, they just piled up dirt under it. Sid Smith is here, and Sid Smith is one of the most important people in my career because he hired our firm early on to do his civil engineering firm. And I've always admired the civil engineers, and I'm indebted to Sid as long as for him having great trust in our firm. And working with civil engineers is always like so critical for our practice. And in this civil engineering project, they piled up earth against the trestle. And so what you ended up with is this kind of hump in this part of Nashville. And that's still there. Again, a map looking, there's where the Bicentennial Mall is going to be. And there's the spring. A close-up view, a little closer view, shows the spring. And you can see the Lick branches, that line that's kind of wiggling through there. The problem with that is the creek flooded and we had cholera epidemic. And cholera was spread because that creek became a big open sewer. Everything from downtown Nashville going into toilets or whatever ended up flowing downhill and into this creek. So this creek was a beautiful stream at one point. It was a nasty sewer. So what did they do? They dug up. First of all, they channelized it, made it straight, and then they buried it. And that tunnel is still there today. The stream was buried. And they take boat rides in it twice a year. You can sign up because they have to check to make sure it's still the structurally okay. And it's like at some points 20 to 30 feet underground. And it flows to the Cumberland River. And on the later maps, now you see the sewer as a sewer line. The sewer is underground now. But nearby was something very interesting. You had the spring was still there, the sulfur spring still there, and water's coming up, so people would get it in bottles. It was sulfur water, and people thought that's healthy. So people would still go down there and get the water. But another thing was nearby, and that's this thing called the Athletic Park. And that's where the Union soldiers who were in Nashville and had nothing to do, they brought a game called baseball to Nashville. And that became Sulphur Dale. And that's where Sulphur Dale was. Sulphur Dale was, you probably know, had an interesting history. Visiting teams hated it because the right field was very steep. And as they were trying to back up and catch a fly ball, they were running backwards up a hill. So a lot of people called it Sulphur Hell. And so remember I showed you the picture off in the distance of State Capitol. It rises above everything on the horizon. That's the Catholic Church that's in Germantown in the foreground. And now this picture. Well, the Capitol is overwhelmed. I mean, Nashville has grown. Looks like a dainty, it just doesn't hold its own. And in fact, even from Jefferson Street, you were looking over these old metal sheds, part of the farmers market sheds. There's actually a grocery store there and then these sheds. And I took this picture probably in 1991. So we didn't come up with the idea of the Bicentennial Mall. That was actually a guy named Victor Johnson who ran Aladdin Industries. You know, the Aladdin Industries and made the, made the thermos things and such important business. And he had a compatriot and designer named John Bridges. And they approached Governor McWhorter in 1989 and said, Governor, what are you doing for the Bicentennial, which is going to show up in like 6 years? He said, I don't know. What should we do? So there's a lot of debate. What should we do? We don't want to build a festival, temporary buildings. And Victor Johnson said, well, Corey, you got to think about this. Because there's a model in Washington, D.C. that works pretty well. And so maybe we do the same thing north of the city. Well, remember I told you there was a creek that ran through there, and limestone is really far below the surface. So that's why there are very few tall buildings in this vicinity. I mean, it's all the buildings in this area 1 story. And even looking north from the Capitol, looking there, the green areas where the park will be. And off to the side, remember I talked about the hump that's created when they fill in dirt into the trestle. Well, there's the hump. And if you drive around this park, you'll realize you go through some tunnels and the rail lines are way up on this hump. There's one other thing about this little map. Where that arrow is where the core drilling is taking place that the state is going to do, the Elon Musk project that's going to go from this area to the airport. They're drilling on that area right where that area is where that arrow is, because that's state parking and they've fenced it off. I have nothing to do with the project, but it's kind of interesting that is going on. Remember I told you about the hump? Well, there's the hump looking at one of the streets, and there was crummy little bridges that weren't really working well. And the real challenge is that over time, or the hope would be, over time you would have cultural buildings beside this new park, this mall, because that's the way it is in Washington. The Washington Mall is just a lawn, but what really makes it work are the Smithsonian's and other museums, air and space that line it. And we were hoping maybe that would happen, but don't know. And they were going to put state office buildings there, but then in the middle of it, the process, Jerry Preston, who was my boss on the project at the time, said, Kim, we aren't going to build a lot of office buildings out there. I said, why not, Jerry? And he said, because we bought the American General building. I said, what? He said, Kim, we bought the American General building. It's now called the Tennessee Tower. Well, the state got a good deal. American General wanted to move out in Brentwood, which they built, and they moved out of Brentwood. The state of Tennessee ended up with the most expensive per square building ever built in Nashville. It's high rise, because American General building was really nice. Travertino on the outside, terrazzo inside, escalators, everything. Really nice building. But because of that, there were going to be no buildings other than maybe the new farmer's market. That's the only thing that we're going to build out there. And so we had this kind of interesting thing, which is, how do we make that park interesting? And that was the big assignment. How do you make this mall interesting for the occasion of the Bicentennial? More than a simple lawn. What are we going to do? And we just struggled on this, had all these meetings across the state. What are we going to do? And basically, it's like, well, what is Tennessee? You ever thought about that? I mean, we were on the phone. I went to graduate school in Philadelphia, and I was on the phone calling some friends. I had a friend in Japan, some people in Europe, some people in Brazil, and I constantly said, when I say Tennessee, what do you think of? Most of them said the same thing, Elvis. And then they say music, country music, whatever. Why is Tennessee special? Well, we have symbols. Wonderful symbols. We have a state that is so unique. And I must tell you that Tennessee is defined by nature on its west end, the Mississippi River, and on its east end by the mountains. But the state lines on above and below are man-made lines. And originally the state was called Tennessee, 1795. But inside that parallelogram is the most interesting diverse landscape, materials, soils, rock formations, plants. It's unbelievable. Now, we have a long state, right? And we have 3 grand divisions, right? Why do we have those? Do you know why? Lack of trust. Because it's a long state, and particularly in its early formation, and then as you get up to the time of the Civil War, it really got contentious because one part of the state had a lot of slaves and one part did not. That causes problems. But in the 1870 Constitution, they decide to balance it with these 3 areas. And a way to make sure that goes well is the Supreme Court of Tennessee. You can never have too many people from one part of the 3 grand divisions with the state Supreme Court. You can't overload it. You've got to always have a division. Why is that? Lack of trust. Okay. Now, how do we symbolize that? With our state symbol, which is the 3 stars, the grand divisions. I mean, that's a positive thing, right? But I'm kind of telling you my opinion on what's really backing that, which is we have a very long state and we have a lot of interesting divisions and different things. But the remarkable thing, as I mentioned earlier, is the geography, the vegetation, the wildlife, and near the river, it's very flat. Here in Middle Tennessee, it's wonderful hills, and you get to Cumberland Plateau, and then you get the second highest mountains in the continent. It's like somebody called God and said, I'd really like a slice of American pizza from the eastern part of the United States. What do you have in mind? He said, I've got it, state of Tennessee. There's more different stuff in that state than any other state. You don't have that in Kansas. You don't have it in Arkansas. You don't have it in Colorado. We have it. And that's one of the reasons I love where we live. I really do. And of course, we have people, great friends, successful individuals. But then we got the music. And that just makes us, so different and so special. So we kind of approached McWhorter and then other state officials and said, we think this park should be based on the land, the people, and music of Tennessee. Let's do something that shows that. And so that was the assignment. And that was the design to do that with hardscape and landscape. And this piece of property that you see, which was parking lots and 1-level buildings, became this park. And I'll briefly sort of walk you through it. Of course, it was celebrated on it was dedicated on June the 1st, 1996. That's many years ago. But what's really good is the state of Tennessee decided, and I saw this happen. It's like seeing sausage being made, going to these meetings with state officials, they're wild meetings, but they did a really smart thing. There was a guy there, he's commissioner of the Department of Environment and Conservation named J.W. Luna. He lives in Brentwood. He's a really good friend. He convinced the folks, let's make this a state park. Because originally some people thought putting a fence around it and letting Capitol Police, the guys that drive around the Capitol, be in charge. He said, no, it needs to be a state park. People love our rangers, don't they? I mean, they're the best ambassadors, and I've dealt with all of them over the years, and they're just fabulous to deal with. So when the park was finished in 1996, it wasn't really complete. There was a section at the far end that wasn't even built, and this required additional funding for a few extra years. Remember I showed the parking on the north slope of Capitol Hill? We thought that should go away. You're going to take away state employee parking? How dare you? We're talking about some serious meetings with people saying, you can't do that. Well, we convinced that, look, that's the north side of the Capitol. The front door of the Capitol faces the river. It's the east side. When you go to the Capitol, you enter on the west side because that's where they have the security thing. But the north facade is just kind of the north portico. We thought, yeah, but it's a beautiful part of the Capitol. So let's make a lawn there. Let's make a beautiful thing. And it's called the Belvedere. And there's Joe Hodgson, who's my landscape friend, and he worked with the late architect Charlie Waterfield to design a place there where you have a beautiful overlook of the park. Remember I talked about the Capitol being things falling apart? Well, it so happened that Charlie Waterfield was involved in that project in the 1950s. And one time we had a meeting and Charlie said, "You want to use some of the fragments from the old Capitol?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, they're out at the state prison." I said, "What?" We drove out there and literally this was when you could just drive up to the state prison, drive around and everything. You can't do that anymore. We come to this field and there are hundreds of column fragments. They're just piled there. I thought I'd gone back to ancient Greece because they look like Greek antiquities. You know, we discovered something that the Greeks built. No, it's just the old limestone. So Charlie arranged a placement of these on the side of the Capitol, and he died right after he did this, and we had it named in his honor. It's a reliquary where you keep sacred objects, and these sacred objects are the original columns that were on the state capitol, and they were made by German craftsmen that settled in a little town called Germantown, north of the Capitol. And so, you know, it's still the working capital. Protests go on. You know, it's the place where we do government. There's a big map, and when I say big, it's probably the largest map of a state in the United States. What color is it? Green. Why? We are a green state. If you fly over Tennessee, and people from Arizona will say, "Boy, this is a really green place." That's great for us. And the rivers that are on this map are granite, but they're polished. And so just like when you fly over a river, it looks like a piece of glass. It's the same on this map. And there's every town in the state of Tennessee that was on a certain map we used. Well, guess what? We left out about 20 towns. And one of them was the town of the head ranger. And his name Thurman Mullins. He said, "Kim, you left off Blackman community, which is near Murfreesboro." I said, "Thurman, it's not on the map." And Thurman said, "It's going to be." Then a state legislator called and said, "You've left out my town." And we said, "Yes, sir, we will have it." So we added 25 names on that map. I mean, that's just, and in fact, there's some names of towns on the map that don't exist anymore. And, you know, it's kind of interesting to watch people wander around it. And the little arrow points to, the map is so big, you know, you're like, you know, it's hard to understand how the great parallelogram that we have. But we also have different aspects of the parallelogram. We have vegetation, we have routes, we have rivers, we have a lot of things. So we put in 8 smaller, I mean, they're 7 feet long, things where you can study an aspect. And that's my father who died, and he was a music educator at MTSU. And so there's one of those maps for music heritage. Now, remember the trestle? The trestle was up in there. Well, you know, and we thought, we'll just do a trestle. Okay, let's go visit CSX. Any of you in this room ever dealt with the railroad? God calls CSX and asks for permission. And we flew down to Jacksonville, Florida, and I thought they would, you know, we need to do a trestle, and you know, y'all help. And kind of CSX is, I'm not going to help you at all, but you're going to build it just like the way we want it. So that was kind of an interesting thing. But the trestle works, and it's a very active line. Now, if you look at the trestle, it has a kind of a graceful arch to it, and beyond is a river wall that has the same arch. And that's where we talk about the rivers of Tennessee. Now, I talked about the vegetation of Tennessee, but really makes our state so good is the amount of water we have. And if you're from Colorado or Arizona, they talk about water. We don't have to talk about water the way they do. And that's why Tennessee was settled very quickly, because there's so much water here. And one of the names of our state, it's called Volunteer State and other things, but one name was the Big Bend State because of the Tennessee River. It makes that big bend, goes down to Alabama and comes back up. So we designed a big bend, and the Big Bend is where we have markers, fountains, and text about the major rivers and what rivers. Now, how many rivers are there? Okay. You know what the answer is? It depends on who you ask. Okay. Because the Corps of Engineers is going to talk about, you know, navigable waterways and barges and big boats. But Environment and Conservation is going to talk about the streams. Don't forget that little snail darter. Don't forget these little streams. They're very important. But the answer is this, and I hope everyone remembers, okay, there'll be a test, but there won't be a test at the end. No test. But I want you to remember the number of rivers of Tennessee. Okay, ready? Easy. Baskin-Robbins. Same number, 31 major rivers. Not lying, that happened. The people that did the study for it showed us, and they had a list of 31. We started laughing and like, we'll be able to remember that. And of course, the fountains have been renovated twice. The major flood of 2010 happened, and that shot out everything, all the electrical systems. But they're hoping they'll be online next year. And while the kids are running around crazy, you can read something about electricity coming to your house. My dad remembers when an electric bulb was installed in his house, and he left it on all night just looking at it because it was on all night. You didn't have to worry about a candle. And of course, this is really what we want. Kids have fun there. People learn something. Okay, and there's the flood line, 2010 flood line. It really came up pretty high in this area. Now, there's something about Walkaway counties because we have 95 counties, right? That's a lot of counties. How do we recognize them? Well, we thought of doing it in several ways. One is a vegetation from across the state that could grow in this area, and we kind of be lined up vegetation from one part of the states here, and then Middle Tennessee with our cedars, and then further north. And then things like this, scouring rush that, a lot of people have never seen, some of the vegetation. And this is the walkway now, and it's all grown up, and there's these markers there. You see a marker in the foreground, and that is one of those for every county. And it kind of has a brief history. And below it is a time capsule, okay? And those time capsules were buried in April 27th, and there were little committees in each county, and I don't know who was it for Williamson County or for Davidson County, but this is a group from Rutherford County. There's my mom on the far left, and they're burying these time capsules. They're this big, and they're full of stuff that will survive, hopefully, for many years in this stainless steel, nitrogen protected tanks. And what's in it? Everything you can imagine. I mean, we have whiskey bottles, guns, and Bibles, because that's what we got to have, right? Whiskey bottles, Bibles, and guns. And a few things like flags and other things that nobody cares about. Anyway, so they're all buried. Well, the dilemma is that there's 95 of them, and they're supposed to be open on June the 1st, 2096. Now, I probably won't be here, and many of you won't be here, but that's only 71 years from now. And so what are they going to do with the stuff? That's an interesting question. I mentioned the fact that that the park needed to be used by a lot of different groups. So one of the things was an amphitheater. Well, who designed the best amphitheaters? The Greeks. So we patterned one of the theaters after the theater in this project, and it has stepped lawns because most of the time it's like this, it's vacant. But when they have events, it could be a lot of fun. It holds a lot of people, and they need a permanent shell or something that's sort of yet to come. And it flooded. There it is in 2010. The biggest bathtub in downtown Nashville. It was pretty bad. It was really pretty bad. But that changed. That's part of the flood. And then I mentioned the land, the people, and the music. Well, the people, that's really kind of the history of the state, pathway of history, which is on the west side. They're vertical markers. They divide decade increments, and then text is on the granite wall to the side. I didn't write any of the text. It was written by a big committee with the State Museum and State Library and Archives. The historians wrote everything you see that's engraved. And I love these vertical pylons. I've always been fascinated with the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, and actually Arthur C. Clarke. I wrote Arthur C. Clarke after we did the project, and he wrote me back. I said, "No, ours are triangular. Yours in the movie was rectangular." So you have the history of the state. There's a section about the the founding of our state, and that's a little fountain. There was another spring in this area, not the Lick Spring, not the Lick Branch or the French Lick, but another spring, and this is a subject of this beautiful painting with the Capitol off in the distance called McNary Spring. And so we have a fountain there, kind of celebrate the founding of the state. That's a good thing. We also have a not so good thing, and that's called the Civil War. And it was a real problem. Tennessee during the Civil War was a disaster because it just broke apart the state. So our design was to break apart the wall, actually break it into fragments as if something exploded on the pavement. And it begins with the wall, which is a straight wall. There's a part in the straight wall where the wall cracks, and it cracks across this work, the session. Now, I thought that would be very easy for the granite people to do. Cold Springs Granite made all the granite, and I got a phone call from them. You really want us to crack it across the work? Okay, so, and I know I'm running a little late if you need to leave, but I've got a few other things to show you. There's a marker there that says north and south. And that's because if you come to the park and you're there, you got to select a side. You can't just walk in the middle. You have to go on the north side or the south side, Union side or Confederacy. The centennial, we wanted to remember that. And so that's a standing thing, 1896. And we have replicas of the markers. We have markers there with photos of the centennial celebration. Again, it was a major part of success. And 1,400-foot long wall. There is an error. You know how to spell the word ratify? Ratify, right? It showed up as redify. That A was an E. We had 1,400 feet long history, granite engraving, 1,400 feet of information, one boo-boo. And I'll show that to you if you ever want it. They came in from Cold Spring Granite and fixed it. Now, we also have World War II Memorial, which is the most important commission in my career, most meaningful commission, is because it was placed in the park. I hope you have a chance to visit it. It has vertical pylons that show the history of the war and Tennessee's involvement in the war. And this is Camp Campbell. Camp Campbell was in Tennessee, but because the post office was north in Kentucky, it became Fort Campbell, Kentucky. But most of Fort Campbell is in Tennessee. How those things happen. We have a globe. It weighs 9 tons. It floats in all directions. And it was made in the only place where we could have that globe made, Germany. And so the guy that made it came to the dedication. And we have the gold stars from the Gold Stars Mother thrown across the pavement to remember about 5,700 people from Tennessee died during World War II. And, I mentioned music. Well, we proposed a carillon. And Jerry Preston, remember, asked me, what's a carillon? I said, it's a bunch of bells. He says, okay. Well, I said, we need a musical instrument. So at the Bicentennial Mall, we have a very large musical instrument. It's a carillon. And, now, of course, people can fly over and make these interesting photos. And the bells are 95 bells on 50 columns. And, it's very interesting. These are solid limestone columns. And we have names of famous musicians engraved at the bottom because that's what has made our music heritage. And, it's interesting at night. But they kind of represent the voices of the counties. Well, we're kind of shouting. We're out in the mall. We're kind of shouting at the state capitol. We need you to do something. Well, we need them to answer us, right? That's what they're supposed to do. That's what they're supposed to do, right? Well, let's put an answer bell up on Capitol Hill to answer the call of the carillon. And so that is in place. It's lined up with 7th Avenue. It's at the very end up on Capitol Hill. And this is the marker. And most of you know the artist Paul Harmon, who lives in Brentwood. I worked closely with Paul to design this structure, and we were inspired again by the Karadzic Monument, and Tower of the Winds, which is another monument in Athens. And we designed something that it's contemporary, but it's based on antiquities from Greece. And Paul designed these things, and they are the musics. They are the 8 different types of music, like angelic forms of music from Tennessee. And that's the structure. Now, people ask, how much did the project cost? It was supposed to cost $26 million. We got it up to 59. One occasion, right? One occasion. And ultimately, what we'd hoped is it would be something like this. Well, that has actually happened now because we now have a state museum. Our firm didn't design it. That's okay. It's okay. I'm over. I'm over. I'm over, Michael. I'm over. You know, Keith, I'm over. We're gonna get to do the State Museum. That's okay with me. You got to go there. It's wonderful, and the exhibits are fabulous. I really encourage you to go there. We did get to do though the Library and Archives, which is on the other side of the park, and I think it's worth a visit. It's basically a research facility, but we decided to clad it with state symbols, and these are stainless steel panels. So you know when you go, you know it's something other than just a regular research building. Constitution's on display, and they have a robotic system there that saved 30% on the expense of doing the project. By going with this robotic system, the state of Tennessee saved 30% on this project. It went from like 260,000 to 160,000. That's a big deal in savings. And that's one of the reasons we went with this system. So hope you can visit it. And as I wrap up, I had to write a book about the project because it's just so many people involved, so many issues to deal with, so many opportunities, and so many things that didn't work right. We had a lot of issues. And also, since the park is finished, there's just so many beautiful photos that people have let me use. You know, the fountains now have colored lights. They're just wonderful to visit. This picture of the World War II Memorial. The World War II Memorial doesn't look that good. I mean, I know I designed it. When I saw this photo, I thought, I've got to put that in the book. So I did. And then things like this on St. Patrick's Day. And this is because the state and our state parks people, and they take care of the place. But this is what means the most to me, that you have a grandfather showing his son the globe. When I saw that picture and took that picture, I thought, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And so the final secret, okay? Now, I talked a long time, but I got to tell you the final secret, okay? What is the final secret? I showed up one day, and there were about 10 people in the middle of Core 3 Stars, and they're huddled together, and they're humming. Now, I had never seen that before, okay? I mean, they're all, and there was a guy standing beside him, and he looked like he was giving the guide, and, you know, are you the guide? And he goes, yes. And I said, what are they doing? He said, I'm proving to them that the Bicentennial Mall is a sacred alien landing spot. And I kind of went, really? And he didn't know who I was. And then I said, really? He said, you know, the architect, he's talking about me and he doesn't even know who I am. He said, the architect copied a map of Mount Meru to do the design of the Bicentennial Mall. And I went, okay. What? He said, Mount Meru. I said, what's Mount Meru? He says, sacred temple in Asia. Okay. A sacred celestial place. Architect copied Mount Meru. Okay. Thank you for sticking around, but this guy really exists. His name is William Henry. He's on the History Channel. And he gives tours, not anymore. I think he moved to California, but he was educated at Lipscomb, and he made his life in these kind of weird, alien, you know, weird things that are now on the History Channel. You know, I mean, it's for real. He's for real. And he says, you know, Kim, you know, and in fact, he comes out with a book called City of Peace. Well, there's our site plan with this other map. And I said, you know, and I bought the book. I mean, I was kind of flattered. He didn't ask for permission to put it in the book. I said, what are you doing? He said, the mall is based on Mount Meru. It's a Holy Grail temple. Okay. And he has tours. There's one of his tours. And he said the World War II ball, he said, that's the Black Sun. Okay. Actually, I met him. We walked across the park together. And he said, you know, I said, where did you get that map? He wouldn't tell me where he got it. I actually discovered it. And it's not what he says it was. But when I got the map and he and I met, I didn't tell him I'd found the real map. He thought it was something else. But it does look a little bit like our site plan. And I'm walking away with William, and I said, William, look, I think I'm a decent architect, and I had some fun designing the part, but I don't think I was inspired from above, okay? I don't think a celestial thing hit me on the head. And he said, you never know. And with that, folks, I will tell you that they had the New Year's Eve there last year, and they may not have it next year. But I want to tell you, thank you for your tolerance and thank you for hanging around.
Kim, before you sit down, we have one more thing for you to do. We have a gift for you that we'd like to give you. It's a pen that we offer our guests that come speak to us. But we'd like to ask you, for the first thing for you to do is to use that pen to sign this book that we read to elementary school students here in Brentwood. So thank you, Kim. And if you have any questions or would like to talk to Kim, please stick around. He also has books for sale that are out in the lobby, and I'm sure that he would love to sell you one of those books. A couple of last things. I'd like to welcome our guests again. Jim, Teresa, you learned about the old Hell's Half Acre in Nashville. Now you can go to downtown Nashville and experience Hell's new Half Acre, which is all of the pedal taverns around downtown Nashville. Karen, thank you for being here. Keith, Tom, John, Tammy, welcome to our club. I have your new member packet right here. If you can stick around, I'll give that to you. If you can stick around and put away chairs, we want to stack them in stacks of 8 by the table. And then we will see all of you on Monday at the Rotary Club golf tournament or at the First Responders Picnic. And if there's nothing else for the good of Rotary, then we are adjourned.